Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banko and me, Adam Moreau. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to
Welcome back, everyone, to T-Work. My name is Grant Banko with my co-host, Adam Moreau. Today, we have Ray Sinibaldi with us. He has written 14 books. He is a aficionado, don't know how to pronounce that word, for history and baseball, with 10 of his books being about baseball. Prior to getting on this call, we were explaining the podcast to him, and he was ready to dive into a story right away, and we had to cut him off. So, Ray, I'm going to pass it back to you and let you sort of dive into what you were going to go into. So thanks for coming on.
Okay. Great to be here, fellas. Good to see you again. Good to chat with you. I guess just to get back to the story, we talk about writing. I always was I used to write a lot as a youngin, and probably about 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago, I went to work. I was in grad school. I was going through a domestic realignment when I was in grad school working the midnight shift in a prison. It was a forensic facility, psychiatric facility for inmates in Massachusetts. And I ran into two guys there, and we discovered that we were both all three of us were pretty interested in baseball. So we spent the night in the dark caverns of that terrible place, and we talked a lot about baseball, the Hall of Fame, things like that. But anyway, it was there that the idea of writing a book with a specific purpose in mind. And the first one was called Falling Through the Cracks of Cooperstown, which we actually wrote and it never got published. So that sits in I kind of keep that in a box up on the shelf just because we did it. And I think we had 14 guys, 15 players who fell through the cracks of Cooperstown who weren't in, and this is in the early 90s, who we thought should be in. And I'm happy to say that 13 of them are now in. So we were kind of on track with that one, but it never got published. But then we started talking about Babe Ruth. We talked a lot about Babe Ruth. All three of us grew up Red Sox fans. These guys were younger than me. One guy's about 7 years younger than me. One kid had just come out of college. So he was about 15 years younger than me. We've stayed friends, actually. But anyway, we were talking about Babe Ruth. And we were all kind of yakking about how Babe Ruth's left Boston as the number one drawing card in baseball. And people didn't really realize that his time with the Red Sox was always kind of mentioned. Lots of biographies written about him. They'd sum up his beginning years with the Red Sox in 35, 40, 50 pages. And the fact of the matter was he was a giant. So we fell upon this idea of the Babe in Red Stockings. And it was all about, it began with his arrival in Boston and it ended with his departure to New York. That was the whole breadth of the book. This was before computers, before PCs. So we went, between the three of us, we read every account in every Boston newspaper that Babe Ruth had played, every account of every game that he had played with the Red Sox. And that turned into the Babe in Red Stockings. And you had to write letters back then and submit syllabuses to publishing companies, and we kept doing it. But the story that I wanted to tell you was it's interesting about the perceptions that you have of yourself. And I can remember I used to fool around with photography, take a lot of pictures of my kids and stuff, and I get a lot of them framed. And it was right here in downtown Venice at a frame store where I met a young woman named Mary Erickson, who was now a very, very accomplished artist. And she was an artist then. And she told me something. She said, you are a writer. Just because you do not pay the bills with your writing, it doesn't mean you're not a writer. She said, I'm an artist. I work here. I frame pictures. I've worked in bakery shops, but that doesn't make me not an artist. And honest to God, when I flipped that switch in my head and I started perceiving myself as a writer, and moving forward, then finding the topic, finding the guys that sort of, we all kind of got together to do this, and we kind of pushed each other. And never, ever, once we finished that manuscript, did I think of if it gets published. It was always a matter of when it gets published. And again, it was a process just to get a publishing company to read the dang thing, to even consider it. You had to have an agent. So I would call these publishing companies and I would lie, and I would say, I'm representing, and I'm representing the authors of The Babe in Red Stocking, which I kind of was, but I was the guy. So, so I would send them in, and we would get rejection after rejection after rejection. And then we finally hit, and we had two publishing companies say they wanted it within 3 days of each other, which was real. Whoa, did I lose you?
No, you're there.
No, I'm still here.
I can't see it, but that's just me. I don't know what happened. I don't know what I hit. But anyway, sorry. So I'll go with it. So anyway, we had two publishing companies that said they wanted it, and we then had a choice. And we went with Sagamore Publishing out of Chicago. And they are now called Skyhorse Publishing. They've gone through a few more metamorphoses. And we ended up getting Babe Ruth's granddaughter, Linda Ruth Tossetti, who wrote the foreword to the book. I still stay in touch with Linda, and she wrote the foreword for us. And we had book signings in Cooperstown at the Hall of Fame and all of that stuff. And it was really, it really turned out to be kind of like a dream come true. We did a book signing at the Hall of Fame. It truly was a remarkable experience. And and that sort of got it started. And then I went almost probably 15 years before I got back into it again with a book on Fenway. And you talked about a routine. I developed a routine that I've just kind of fallen away from recently. But back in the 90s, when I was teaching school and I was working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, whatever the heck it was, teaching school, the only time I had was in the morning. So I started getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would write for 2.5 hours before I left for work. And I did that pretty much for I've been doing that for almost 20 years now, 25 years. But I backed off a little bit. Now that I'm retired, I have more time available to me. So, but it's been a journey, and I've reveled in it. I love it. It's and like I said, I'm looking forward to getting back into it with my blog with fenwaypark100.org, which will be coming back to life in about another 30 days.
Perfect. Good plug right at the beginning. I like it. Ray, I guess taking a step back, looking at, I mean, you said the first kind of book you're reading, Fall Through the Cracks, Cooperstown, wasn't published. Right. Then you met Mary Erickson, and she basically said, you're a writer. What was the gap between you having that conversation and you actually getting The Babe in the Red Stockings published? What was that kind of gap?
Published? Well, it's interesting. So that was probably 90. We worked together from 90. Probably it went 5 years before it came out. But it was in my head, that's when I started pursuing a writing career, looking for things to write about. Knew it was going to be baseball, but it was almost, let's see, so that was probably 91. I came back to Florida. So that was, and I met her in 92, and probably 93, we were wrapping up Falling Through the Cracks at Cooperstown. So it was within a year that it started, and it was 97 when The Babe in Red Stockings was published. So
Gotcha.
It was a year from getting on the horse, and about 4 years to get the horse to the finish line.
Yeah, no, I wanted to bring that up for perspective because I listened to a couple different podcasts, and a guy I really follow and love is an entrepreneur, Alex Ramosi. Started his business, and one thing he always quotes over and over again with entrepreneurship is he's like, you get the Rocky cutscene at the end of the movie where he's successful, and it's a 5-minute clip basically from becoming the hero. And he always
Right.
relates it to, if you're an entrepreneur or doing it in real life, that rocky cutscene of 5 to 10 minutes is actually 5 years, 10 years. So you
Right.
have to have that patience. So I wanted to give that perspective from your
Well,
point of view and what you
yeah.
experienced.
Well, it's funny. I think about that all the time. People always talk about, oh, this person's was an instant success. I'm not sure that really exists, because, like you just said, the buildup is the way I mean, I look at these people that are on whatever you call it, the Americas, all those shows where these unknowns come on, and then all of a sudden people say, oh, so it's almost like a syndrome. People, I used to teach kids that used to have that kind of a thing. Well, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to be a rapper. I'm just going to rap. I'm just, this, and this. And so they didn't need to go to school. They didn't need to do this. They did, because I'm just going to be a rapper. And they have the impression, they had the impression that these people literally just popped up out of, like flowers out of the cracks in the sidewalk, not realizing the work that was going into it that nobody ever sees, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can feel it from my own perspective of the 5 minute cutscene, which is actually 5, 10 years in the making.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I live that every single day. It always helps for perspective when somebody else is an entrepreneur and lets you know, like, hey, don't worry, you only have 3 more years to go until you're
Right.
really gonna make it.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that I think is pretty crazy is really that perspective change that you went through.
Uh-huh.
Like telling yourself you are a writer, giving yourself that identity. Like, do
Right.
you feel you had an identity before you were a writer, or were you just like looking for purpose in what you really love to do?
That's a great question, Adam. I think it actually happened at a transitionary time in my life. I would say that my primary identity at that point in time was a dad. I had little kids, well, younger kids. All my kids were in school. I had four of them at the time that were in school. I had just gone through a pretty a shakeup. Uh, I had just gone through a divorce, and it was that in which I found my purpose. But I will tell you, I was I was a guy in a canoe heading down a river without a paddle. Even though I was in my 30s, I had never really put my oar in the water. I come out of college, I come out of high school, and I wanted to be a school teacher. Back in the 70s, I graduated in 1970. In the 70s, you couldn't get teaching jobs. So people say, yeah, you can't do that. You don't want to do that. You're never going to get a job. You're never going to get a job. So I allowed all that kind of noise to affect me. And I went to college and I graduated from college, and then I was just knocking around. Um, I spent 5 years I started a little t-shirt business. I spent 5 years selling t-shirts, my own t-shirts that I made outside of Fenway Park, because I love baseball and I wanted to be involved with that. And I now was starting to have a family. I couldn't afford to be going to Fenway Park all the time. So I incorporated a way that I could go there and make money and still be a part of it. But then after the breakup, we had moved to Florida. I found the purpose in basically putting foot down the goal. That's when I said, I'm going to get my graduate degree. I'm going back to Florida and I'm going to teach school. And I still heard it then. You're not going to be able to get a job. This is like in the late 80s, early 90s. And I said, I'm going to get a job. And I'm going to get a job because I'm going to teach the kids nobody wants to teach. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. And this was all happening simultaneously. It was right around that same time that I met Mary. It's right around that time that she kind of put that in my head. And I went back. I got my master's in special education, and I came back to Florida, and I started teaching in 1992. But that's really when the first time, and I used to tell my students this, it's the first time I put my oar in the water. First time I actually said, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. Set a goal, went out and accomplished it. And then and that was all happening simultaneously as a teacher, and then as a writer. And then I really realized that, it was a motivating factor for me as well, and it helped me become a better teacher. And I used to tell the guys, I said, I was knocking around for half my life or more at the time. I said, but you put your oar in the water, the younger you are when you do that, the better chance you're going to give yourself. And that was really a message that I tried to resonate with the guys, the kids that I was teaching. And they were all, for the most part, most of my years teaching, I was teaching, for a lack of a better term, they used to call them at-risk kids, but it was wayward boys. It was in a residential program for the most part, with all males. And I had the greatest teaching job in the country, no doubt.
If you don't mind, I kind of want to stick on this oar in the water theme.
Go ahead.
And the one that I want to get into is right at the end of what you were telling us there. You said the earlier you get your oar in the water, the better off you'll be. Now, I don't know if this is pushback or just a thought. What's kind of running through my head is like, were there like experiences that you feel like you had, or if there's things that the world as a whole can benefit from just kind of like going with the flow for a little bit? Or do you really think it's like a grab life by the horns type of deal that the sooner you do it, the better off you're going to be?
That's an excellent question, because I don't, it's funny because I talk to kids today, and I used to say, listen, I said this back in the 90s. I wouldn't want to be a kid. Wouldn't want to be been a kid back then. It's very tough being a kid today. And part of that is because I went to college, and I didn't have it wasn't like going to I wasn't going there necessarily to train myself to do something. I wasn't going to be a doctor. I wasn't going to be that. So I went there and I found myself, it was a liberal arts, I became a political science major and a psych minor. And I just learned about stuff that I was interested in. I would tell the kids there is something to be said for just kind of, if I would caution this, set that, if that's your goal, that's a cool goal. Go see what you want to see. And I did that as well. I mean, I was, at 25, I 25, 23, I quit college. I was two courses away from graduating. I quit college. I had 6 credits away. I went to work for a year, and then I spent 3 months just driving across the country in a van. I went to 38 states in one summer, and I did all that. So that was, and then I went back and I finished school. If that's a goal, let it be a goal. But I still would have to say that in this day and age, Adam, I think the sooner you can set yourself at something that you want to do, that you find what you want to do, and that you get to it, I think that you'll be better served in the long run. And that doesn't mean that can't change. Whatever it is, that can't change. I was never, I'm going to work here 35 years, get a gold watch, and then head out to the sunset kind of guy. I've done a lot of things. I mean, a lot of things. And I'm kind of glad I did. It was a mishmash. I wished I could have made a little bit more money along the way, but what are you going to do? If you're going to be a street vendor. What's that?
I'm with you on the, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, just do it. Like I really struggle to just kind of spin my wheels in one place. I would say I align more with you on the oar in the water. And truthfully, like, there's a couple times it's caused me to regret a couple things that like I kind of wish I would have done. But every experience that I've taken on in my life that I am passionate about, I put the oar in the water and I went all out, and I said I'd figure it out as I went. Or like it's why I kind of subscribe to the entrepreneurial lifestyle. I mean, I'm on my 3rd venture now and I'm 30 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's hard to stop. But then I think about like the things I wish I could have done. Like when I stopped playing baseball, in the equivalent for you, two classes to go in college, and you pack up and you travel the country. Like to me, like yes, some of that is like you're taking yourself out of the direction you might have once been headed, but you also went all in again on something else you wanted to do. You knew you wanted to experience, see the world. Like that's not something I ever took on, and I wish
Uh-huh.
I did that at one point in my life.
Well, it's a you raise an interesting point. Figure it out as you go. And I say that all the time. We'll figure it out. And I know so many people who I deeply care about that are bound by fear. And they'll give you the what ifs. Listen, moving to Florida. I can remember when it was moving to Florida, and my dad, I'm going back, this is so mid-80s. And my dad said to me, he said, listen, you can always find 100 reasons why not to do something. He said, just find one reason to do it and go do it. And that's so true. It is so true. And you've got to be the greatest advice I could give you is don't be afraid to figure it out as you go. And I basically have done that. You know what? To be honest with you, I'm still doing it. You know, I'm 7 years retired. I'm 70 years old, and I'm still doing it. It doesn't it allows you, when you have the confidence, you develop the confidence in yourself to be able to do that, then there's nothing you won't try. And you got to know that right now. You're sitting here at 30 years old, you've done it 3 times. So at 50, you won't be afraid to do it again because you got it. You know you can figure it out as you go. That's a big thing. It might be my first commandment.
We'll write that down. We'll get that. We'll
Yeah,
get that.
Sinibaldi's first commandment. Figure it out as you go.
We'll
There
make
we
sure to
go.
quote that.
Yeah.
Trademark it, everything.
Name of the episode, Racing a Baldy
Yeah.
Way of Life. Figure it out as you go.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's because it's going to get you. You got me going. I can go in 12 different directions right now.
That's okay. Just go all in on one of them.
Okay. Okay. There you go. I'll figure it out as I go. Listen, because now I'm at this stage in my life. So now I'm 70 years old, and I can remember so right around the time that the age that I am now is when I went and moved back in with my dad to go to grad school. Okay. My life had blown up, and I was living with my dad, and it really was. It was a hellacious experience at one point because I was away from my kids, which was killing me. But I had a great opportunity with my dad, and it was remarkable because he became my best friend. I got to know my dad in ways I didn't know. But one of the things that he had said to me, he used to say, he said, the aging process is not for the faint of heart. And I can remember sitting in the living room with him one night, and I said, and I looked at him and I said, you know what, Pop? I said, I'm sitting right next to you, and I'm missing you right now. I said, and I'm missing you right now because I've realized that I'm never going to miss you more than when I get to where you are, and I'm going to want to talk to you about it, and I'm going to want to pick your brain about it. I'm going to want to do all that stuff. And I have to tell you, and I'm there now, and it's so true, because when you get to this stage in your life, there are things that you encounter, like big time. Number one, you're faced with your own mortality, and it comes at you in different ways, and it isn't in a morbid way. It's not in a way of I'm going to be. My grandfather I had a grumpy old grandfather who every birthday from 61 on said, this is going to be my last one. And he died when he was 86. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it wasn't that kind of thing. I wasn't mopey. It's not mopey thing, but it's just an awareness, because you look down the road. I mean, I'm going to have 13 grandkids by the end of April. They range in age, going to be range in age from 20 and a junior in college to newborns. And I get this wave of them. And now with the little ones, I look and I say, oh, the likelihood that I'm not going to see this one graduate from high school, or see this one do that, that's real. That's a reality. It's just the stats. The stats tell me I got about 8 years to go. I'm going to push for a hell of a lot more than that, but that's just the reality. And again, it's not morbid. But what it does is it keeps you present in the moment.
Hmm.
And if you're present in the moment, you'll find gratitude. And if you live with gratitude, you'll find joy. So it's but that's all, you got to figure it out as you go. And Dad told me that. He said, don't think you're ever going to get it figured out, because just when you think you do, life is waiting to bring you to your knees, and it will, because it's just the battle, and that's just true of whatever we're going to step into, whether we're doing our business, whether it's a job, whether we're working for somebody else. We're always on our way. You're on your ways to peaks and valleys. You're always walking up, getting to the top, then you're going to be walking back down again. It's just going to happen. So, it's been an invaluable piece of advice to me, for sure. Stay where your feet are.
I'm trying to figure out which route you're going here, because you're going pessimistic, then optimistic, then pessimistic. You keep going back and forth.
Just pragmatic.
Well, and that, okay.
Yeah, I know,
you know
I
what that is?
guess.
Because what's going to happen? Because it's all part of it's all part of the road. It's all part of the ride. My favorite writer was Khalil Gibran, who was a great philosopher and poet. And he said, he wrote in his book, The Prophet, he wrote on joy and sorrow. And he said, they are inseparable. And I'm paraphrasing him, because while one of them sits at your table, the other is sleeping upon your bed. Because, you can't experience one without the other. It's just my dad's way of telling me that was, it's all of life is bittersweet. And that is true. That is true, because we're going to lose people we love. It's going to happen. It's all part of the ride. And, bad things are going to happen to you. It's just, and nobody escapes it. And you just have to be prepared for it. And a lot of it you can't prepare for, but you have to react to it. And there's, I think part of the problem we have today in our world today is as simple as we try to keep kids from losing. We don't want them to lose. My grandson, who's now 7, is heading into his 3rd year of coach pitch Little League up in Palm Harbor. And, and everybody keeps running around the bases. Nobody makes outs. Nobody makes anything. So it's funny to have to teach kids real, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think we do the kids any justice by not teaching them how to lose and the fact that they're going to lose. And that's a very simple little thing but it's indicative of where we are. Everybody wants to find a safe space. Everybody doesn't want their feelings hurt, all these kinds of things. I mean, life's hard. It's the number one thing I tell my 7-year-old grandson. It's hard, buddy. It's going to be hard. We just have to learn to live with it. And it's, we do them a greater service when we tell them the truth. So it's not pessimistic, Bank. It's realistic. And nobody's going to escape.
I'll ask the 7-year-old in about 5 years if he thinks you're a pessimist or not.
That's it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Or Josh.
I'll arrange that for you. This is my daughter Margot's oldest son. He's a lefty. So we're working him on the mound right now.
Good. Yeah,
Perfect.
give that kid a future, but he'll never experience the joy of success and making it if he doesn't have the sorrow at some point. Like I know we're joking around right now, but that's the piece that I wanted to come back to, and all of that is like using the philosopher's very fancy phrasing that you then paraphrase for us to boil it down. Like I try to live with that in my daily life of if there's joy, there has to be sorrow. If there's love, there has to be hate. Those two are not opposites. They run in the same exact path and they will always be together. Like the thing that's the opposite of those is indifference or a lack of experience. And if you're constantly hanging your hat on indifference or lack of experience, how can you live life? How can you put yourself out there if you're afraid of the result on either end? That to me is incomprehensible.
You're spot on. There is no separation for it, and it's kind of a it's as a parent, it's difficult because you want to protect your kids as much as you can. Nobody wants to get hurt, but you learn that it's impossible to do so. So rather than rather than be out in front of them and clearing the pathway and filling all the holes, I'd rather be behind them and then just help them get out of the holes. And okay, what can we do the next time? So how do we miss the next hole? How do we do? How do we handle that? And you're absolutely right. It's inescapable, and I would rather prepare the child for the road and prepare the road for the child. I've told all my kids as they're raising their kids, I said, if you are going to err on one side of the other, being too soft or too tough on the kids, choose the too tough side, because you will serve them better. And as they move forward, you will serve them better. And that's hard to do. And that's where that old phrase comes from. This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. You never can understand that when you're a kid. But when the further down the road you get, the more that is true. Because, you get people, you talk about the love that you get from all of that. And without question, I now have an army of people in my life that I would die for in a second. That's pretty good. That means I got to have a lot of love around here. That's pretty good.
Yeah, Ray, I'm gonna relate this back. I mean, you're obsessed with history in and of itself,
Mhm.
and sort of looking back, you're like, life's always gonna hit you.
Yep.
But there's definitely ways you can learn from history from other people, like these conversations me and Adam are having on this show, trying to learn as much as possible. And I'm gonna bring it back to, I believe it was your grandfather worked for John F. Kennedy.
Correct.
Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to
Yeah.
bring that definitely had an impact on your life, and you had exposure to that. I mean, I guess looking at history and sort of that piece of things and getting exposure there, how did you learn from just history overall, but then those experiences through your grandfather and your family as well and other people?
Well, it's interesting. I used to, and thinking back, I actually I've written three different books about JFK, and done three different pictorial essays on JFK, and I wrote a book about Jacqueline Kennedy. Um, and it's interesting because as I was going through all that, and what I realized, now again, maybe just as I'm coming up on retirement, or just early retired. Um, I was I realized what an unbelievable impact and how John F. Kennedy shaped my life. And beginning with the fact that I was 7 when he was elected president. My grandfather was his campaign secretary in 1946 in his first run for Congress. And then again in 1952 when he ran for the Senate, was elected for the Senate for the first time. So as a third grader in 1960, when JFK was elected president, I was just absolutely enamored with the fact that my grandfather knew the president of the United States. I mean, that was like just unbelievable to me. And I was obviously very proud about that. I was kind of I thought I was the cock of the walk. Um, the kids in school I would say at school, the kids in school would make fun of me. They'd say you were crazy and all that. And then it was a little article in the local newspaper about my grandparents receiving an invitation to the inauguration. So, I got validated or something at that point in time. But it was a very, very obviously I was a kid. 2 years later, when we were 9, but we really couldn't afford to go on a lot of vacations, hit the road for a lot of vacations. But we went on a road trip to Washington, D.C. And we went to Arlington National Cemetery, and we visited the White House. We went to the Capitol building, and we spent a couple of nights in D.C. And that is when I was completely and totally bitten by anything historical. Was that particular trip? The following year, obviously, President Kennedy's assassination. There are few events in your life when you'll experience collective joy or collective sorrow, and there was nothing. I mean, it's impossible really to describe. I would think that I don't know, you guys might remember 9/11. You might be old enough, or maybe not, little kids in 2001,
Mhm.
or old enough to
Second
remember probably
Second
what
grade.
that, you have memories of that?
I
second grade, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Okay, so
very
that's very,
unique
very
experience.
similar. So I was in the sixth
Yeah.
grade when the president was killed, and then it was 3 days. It was the first time that we went on, news 24/7 on all the news stations. It was only three networks at the time. All of them were covering it across the country, um, from the Friday afternoon till after the funeral on Monday morning. So it was that kind of profound effect that it had. And what I never really realized until I looked back on it, but even when I was in grad school in Massachusetts, I went in and I became a volunteer docent at the JFK Library, taking classrooms full of young kids through the museum. And one kid, fourth grade kid, asked the question. He said, "Did you know President Kennedy?" And it was the best question I ever got, ever. And I said, "No, I didn't." And he said, "Well, what are you doing here then, if they didn't know him?" And I said, and I kind of caught me off guard a little bit. And I thought for a minute, and I said, "Well," I said, "I was about your age when President Kennedy was president." I said, "And the best thing I can tell you is that he made me feel like my life could make a difference." I said, "And I guess because he's not here now, maybe I'm here to tell you that that's the case. Your life can make a difference." He wasn't all that impressed, but at the time, but maybe he would think about it as he went on. But it was that that's as I kind of went through it and thinking about the impact that had on me. But it molded me. Made me. It got me interested in history. It made me want to be a teacher. It made me wanted to be a history teacher. And then I got to do all of those things. So I guess that was really at the core of me from a very, very early age, but not being fully aware of it and fully understanding it till I looked in the rearview mirror, till I looked back upon it, which I guess is true of many things. And that's where I guess you kind of develop a little bit of wisdom if you got half a thinking brain, basically.
So
Well,
ooh, can I go,
I,
Banko?
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yes. All right, thanks. So I wanted to ask kind of the difference between there's one thing of like wanting to consume knowledge and like immerse yourself within it. And then there's another to profess knowledge or go down the education route. Like for you, what was the draw to not just throwing yourself into learning as much as you could, but sharing it with the world around you?
Ah, that's a good question. I did a good deal of screwing up my choices I would have as a teenager. I um I was a smart kid. I had I and I was a jerk. I kind of took it for granted. On ninth grade, I mean, I was a great student. I was smart, and then I got in high school, and I limited my chances. And as a ninth grader, back in those days, well, we had junior high, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade, so we didn't start high school till our sophomore years. But it was I kind of blew it up. So by the time I got out of high school, I had barely recovered. I almost got kept back a couple of times. I was skipping school. I was, as my dad would say, I was a stunard. It's a little Italian expression that means knucklehead. Not really knucklehead, but something worse than that. Dumber than knucklehead. But anyway, so I always had an affinity for that kind of kid. And I've developed an expression in my life that said, "God protects the innocents and the fools." And I always was it seemed as though, even though my oar wasn't in the water, I felt like I was along the way, I was taken to where I was supposed to go and where I ultimately landed. And as I said, I ultimately landed in a teaching school for 26 years of which none of them were taught in a regular school. So I was teaching juvenile justice programs. I taught a residential program, like I said earlier, for 16 years at the Florida Sheriff's Youth Ranch. I was teaching in the jail. I was teaching an off-site severely emotionally disturbed kids. And that's because I had gone through a lot as a kid. I mean, I had gone through I went through a situation, and we'll be frank here. I've never talked about this before in this type of a format, but I'll do it now. I was sexually abused as a kid. I was sexually abused by a Catholic priest as a kid, and that, needless to say, that put me through a lot of changes, and the anger and the sort of acting out that was going on in high school. I didn't have the wherewithal to realize what that was related to. And it took me many years into adulthood before I could figure that out. And when I finally did figure that out, that was all. And I was going through that and sort of processing through that. I was a 30-year-old man. I was in my 30s when I began that whole thing. So you'll notice it all kind of comes together at about that same time. The oil goes in the water. I realize what had happened to me. I start dealing with that. I start facing that. I start acting upon that. I start processing that in a positive way. And from there is, okay. And all of this probably within a 5-year period was all happening at the same time. That I'm going through that I'm writing, that I'm meeting Mary, that that I'm getting all these little tidbits along the way, that I then become, that I'm going to become a teacher. And then I would say where the God protecting the innocents and the fools is, as I don't land in a regular classroom with regular kids. I land in my first job is in a psych unit at Manatee Memorial Hospital, teaching high school kids. And then from there, it was like a hospital day treatment program. Then it was into the juvenile justice side of it. And then I landed at the Florida Sheriff's Youth Ranch, which was, it was the perfect place for me to be, because the kids, all those guys there came. It was kind of all of those guys were, the way I used to describe it, they were aspiring juvenile delinquents. And they had a myriad of things going on with them. They came from a wide cross section of kids from all over the state of Florida, with a wide cross section of difficulties that I had to overcome. And I had, I'll say it again, it was the best teaching job in the country. And it was wonderful. And I was right where I belonged. I could relate to them. I related to them immediately, and that made it, that was, and I was fortunate enough that I had a mentor, the late great Dr. Barbara Chadsey at Manatee County, who saw it in me when she interviewed me, and she knew exactly where I belonged, and she ended up placing me in all those places, as I move forward. So it was, get the oar in the water, figure it out as you go, and you'll end up in the right place, basically.
And I'm not ending the show here, but I do want to pause and just say thank you for sharing everything, Ray, and telling your story. And I mean, we really do appreciate you taking the time. And I guess like hearing all of that go together. I mean, you're saying put the oar in the water as soon as you can, but at the same time, I mean, obviously it took you some time to put the oar in the water. I would kind of reiterate it back to, it all works out in the end as
Right.
long as you keep going. Would you say
That's
that
exactly right. Yeah. Well, it's funny because, put your oil in the water as soon as you can. And for me, I did. And that was as soon as I could. It just so happened that it was later then. So I guess my thing with the boys at the ranch were trying to get them, trying to get them aware of what pushes their buttons. And when you become self-aware, then you can gain self-control. But if you're not self-aware, if you're not aware of what makes you, what's pushing that button, that's getting you agitated, making you angry, all those kinds of things, then you're just a cauldron of emotion waiting to explode at something that seemingly is insignificant. but it's just that straw that breaks the back. So it's that was what I sort of focused my focus on the boys were to teach them how to become aware of who they were, what was causing the angst within them. And it was a challenge, and it was a blast. It was a very, very rewarding on both our ends for both of us. Good stuff.
I
Yeah.
really like the reframe of oar in the water as soon as possible to as soon
Right.
as you can. Like
Yeah.
to me, I like
Good
those
point.
resonated with me like two completely different phrases in different languages. Because at first, when we're having this discussion, it's like try to grab the bull by the horns right away. Like you got this, like absolute, like manifest destiny. If you can do it,
Right.
go get it. But then when you
Uh-huh.
say as soon as you can, it's almost like a whole new emotion that I'm experiencing when I hear
Right.
that. It's like, okay, like it is okay, observe, understand your surroundings, see what's around you. And then once you have it in your power, make that decision. And like I kind of wanted to go down that route, like in terms of like awareness and what you talked about and like how you showed these kids that you were working with how to be self-aware. But obviously that comes with you gaining self-awareness in some
Correct.
capacity. Like
Yep.
in your own life, like when did you first like notice that you were self-aware, you were conscious of the decisions you were making and how they impacted you?
A good question. That's probably, I'm going to say, right around the time that, again, right at the
Hmm.
at this juncture, when I set the goal that I was going to go get my master's and I was going to become a teacher. That's when that was, well, again, it was becoming aware of the fact of what, in fact, had happened to me. I mean, that's, they say that famous saying, denial is more than just a river in Egypt. And it really was amazing to me when I became aware of what had happened to me. Um, and then from there, it was probably about a 12-year process. So from the time that I became aware there until so there's probably, yeah, it was probably 12 years that when I became aware that I had been a victim, to where I kind of put action into motion. So that was about a 10 to 12-year process. And that's when it all started to happen. When I became self-aware. And knowing, being able to put cause and effect together. And again, I get back to what I said earlier about my dad. It's an ongoing process. It is truly an ongoing process. It's funny. I kid around with Coach Faulkner and the guys at the baseball field because I'm aware of the fact that I don't want to become the grumpy old guy who's complaining when all of the snowbirds are here, because they kind of crowd me out and I got to sit in traffic and I got to line in Publix and all that kind of stuff. And the older me, or the younger me, I should say, would be a source of aggravation. But I'm aware of the fact that I'm becoming that guy, and I don't want to become that guy. So, and being self-aware even at this stage of my life keeps me from becoming somewhat the old curmudgeon. You can't avoid some curmudgeonliness, because you just lose patience. But you don't want to become. That's the difference, Bank. That would make you a pessimist. That turns you into a negative person when you're just griping all the time. Okay. Now I can laugh at myself being the fool and letting crazy things get to me like that. So it's ongoing. That's a very small thing, but it's the little day-to-day things that you can change and you can have control over. And I find myself now still harping back on one of the things I used to say to my boys all the time was, you get 100 different times throughout any given day that you choose to release positive energy or negative energy. And we don't even realize it. but be aware of that and choose to release positive energy. And it's amazing when you see that. And now, so that was, my goodness, that was 25 years ago that I started doing that, 30 years ago that I started saying that. So it took me saying that to all those boys for all those years. And now here I am in my 60s, just hit 70, moving forward, where I finally can, in fact, do that on a fairly consistent basis. And it's amazing. We're working for a hell of a long time.
I feel like you have a list of one-liners that you're just like, I need to incorporate this in the answer, because every answer, it's like that was an incredible one-liner. But it's also
Well,
just you've been telling stories for such a long time. I'm assuming they just come
right.
naturally to you.
That's
he's an
correct,
author.
Frank. It is. Well, you know, Faulkner says to me all the time, he said, you want to write a book about your father, all your dadisms. And I said, you know, that's not a bad idea, because it's amazing how it all comes back to me. I mean, even now, and I chuckle I chuckle about it all the time. You know, but I still get to sort of do a little bit of teaching, you know, being with the boys on the baseball team, and that's a big plus for me. That staying in touch with, you know, and I really appreciate you guys, you know, bringing me on to do this, because being around young people is what keeps me from getting old. I mean, you can't stop the process. You can't stop the age process. You know, I know, you know, I say this to my brother all the time. I said, I know I'm going to die. I know my body's going to stop working one day and I'm going to croak, and that's going to be it. But I'm never going to be old on my way to get there, because old is when you don't do something, when fear takes over. Oh, I shouldn't be going out and throwing those BPs, you know, during the week because I'm 70, blah, whatever. No, I'll do it until my body tells me not to do it. You know, maybe you shouldn't golf when it's hot. No, I'll golf until my body tells me I'm not going to do it. You know, those kinds of things. And it really truly is. It's an attitudinal thing. But being around the young people it's unbelievable. It is an unbelievable tonic, because it keeps you sharp to the extent that you can be sharp, and it keeps you, and it's energizing as hell. You feed off their energy, and that's never a bad thing, never a bad thing. And
And
you
to
guys,
give,
I count you guys as young people too, so that's good.
yeah, exactly. No, I was going to give some background on to the listeners that don't know us. So
Yep.
Ray has helped out with my high school baseball team. So I've known him since sophomore year of high school at this
Yep.
point. So going
Yep.
on 12 years.
Uh-huh.
Ray would show up to the field probably before us, start running poles to warm up, because he was throwing BP to us in about an hour. So he'd run 10 poles and get all jazzed up and excited. He was probably more excited than we were to be there. So just wanted
Yep.
to give that background there.
Yeah. It's my home away from home.
Well, I think that home away from home, you're giving me another rabbit hole that I want to go down.
Okay.
So you created like this sanctuary for yourself in just like such a simple joy, right? Like we were messing around like talking about Banko's dad. Like that's how he
Right.
feels about the golf course. That's how
No
you
doubt.
feel about the baseball field. I'm sure that's how you felt about Fenway Park when you were a kid or when you were growing up in
No
Boston.
doubt.
Like
Probably still.
yeah, probably still. Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm assuming sanctuary for you is also like sitting at a desk with like a pen and paper with a keyboard or something like that.
Mhm.
Like,
No doubt.
what, like, is it something within you that like you just feel at peace when you're in these places? Like, I get it. Like, as bro as it might sound, like that's how I feel when I'm in a gym or when I'm
Right.
on a baseball field. Like, we share that together. Like,
Sure.
that's
No,
like.
listen, it's, you know, and it's funny what's come out of all of this is, you know, we talk about it with with the baseball team, and Grant, you were part of these conversations, I'm sure, along the way, that, you know, the whole idea of it is it's about relationships. And it is, bro. I mean, you know, I think about, it's, you know, I remember talking to Mark Guthrie about this one time. And he said, you know, when it's over, it's not, you don't miss all the work. You don't even miss playing. You miss the guys. You miss the guys, and there's a camaraderie there that is a broism that's it's special. It's just a special thing. And I think of it now and I'm more appreciative of it now. But I found, when I was running in the outfield, interestingly enough, when I was running in the outfield, I would write. I would work through a lot of things that I was working on in my keyboard while I was running in the outfield. And I would work through lots of different things while I was running, because when you want to get your mind off the fact that you're running, so then you don't lose your breath and you don't do all that kind of stuff. So all of those places have become. But you are right, Adam. That's a very interesting point. And as you were saying it, there is a sanctuary to it. I find that, and it's a go-to place. I am very fortunate that I have several of those go-to places. Listen, there are a few things I've enjoyed. There are very few things I've enjoyed more in my life than walking the golf course with your old man, Grant. I mean, there's something there that we'd walk all the time. We both love the golf course in the late afternoon, early evening, more than any other time. We love being out there. We're both kind of, we have a little hermitage to us. Like, we don't mind going off by ourselves, that kind of thing. And I really found I found a golf soulmate with your dad, for sure. And I've only had two of them in my life. Another one was a guy that I played a lot with when I was in grad school. It's just something very special about it. But having that sanctuary is very, very, again, it's energizing. And they're different, but they bring the same thing to me. And it's a sense of grounding. It's a sense of home. And baseball has been a part of my life. My goodness, 7 years old, maybe, when I started. I mean, a passionate love. I used to say, I've women come and women go, but baseball stays forever. Has been kind of my deal. It's kind of I kind of joke about it, but it is true, and it's got me through a lot. And my love of the game has done nothing but deepen. But my interest in the game has really, my interest in big league baseball has diminished considerably. Now, I really don't have a rooting interest anymore at the major league level. I was a passionate Red Sox fan for so long. I lived and died with them. But I love being on the field with the high school kids. I love watching high school baseball, and I love watching college baseball. And maybe that's just a natural thing, because now there's so many guys like you, Grant, guys that I've met, guys that have come through the program, guys that I've played against, who are now playing in college and stuff. So I get a big kick out of that. I get a big kick out of watching the kids that go on and play in college, and I can stream a game here or stream a game there. So the love of the game remains, but I'm not sure I could name you 5 guys that are on the Red Sox right now. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I look at that as a maturation process. I'm emotionally invested more in the kids on the field now than I am in whether or not the Sox are going to win the World Series. And I guess maybe it's because I've had that experience, which my dad, God rest his soul, lived 77 years, and it never happened for him. He was born 3 years after they won in 18, and he died in 98, which was 6 years before they won it in 04. So he used to say to me, "I'm running out of next year's." He used to say that to me all the time. And ultimately he ran out of next year's. So I went to his resting place when I went up for the parade in 2004. I went and visited him and brought him a newspaper.
That's awesome.
Good.
Ray,
And that was a book I never wrote that I wished I could. It was after that parade. It was an amazing thing. And I went to the cemetery, and you would not have believed, this is one small piece of a cemetery in one town in Massachusetts. And when I left there, I took a few pictures with it. I went and bought one of those Insta cameras. And I mean, people had put balloons, they stretched t-shirts over gravestones. And I said at that time, I said, I wish I had 1 month to drive all over New England with a camera. And I would have had the greatest coffee table book ever. Just all the graves that had to be adorned with all this stuff. I mean, it just had to be everywhere. It was pretty cool. But anyway, I got to see the little piece.
I never would have thought of that, and that's incredible. Like
Yeah.
think about like that sense of community behind a team. Like I do think that's incredibly interesting about New England sports in general, how it is like a whole region of the country that is just madly in love and obsessed with this team that not only represents their city, but their culture and everything behind it. And like you said, like you went to your father's grave
Right.
and with the newspaper, and you're not the only one. Like,
no, God, no. Thousands. I bet it was thousands. It was thousands. There's no doubt. Listen, I was at the time, 2004, there was a radio sports show right here in Venice on WAMR called Scott and Jake Show. Scotty Hayes and Jake Jacobson. They were just two local guys, and they did it. And it was the studio used to be here in Venice. Now then it went up to Sarasota, or whatever. But I was doing, like, I'd go in with them a couple of days a week, and whatever, as just a voice, talking head, and talking baseball and all that. But they had me calling in every morning because they were really early in the morning. They were on, and I was calling in there every morning. And I'll tell you, the day after the Red Sox won that World Series, it was that night, the night before the fourth game, Edgar Renteria stepped up, and I went and got my dad's ashes. I had some of my dad's ashes that I've kept, and I put them on my lap. And then I called Josh, my son Josh. Grant knows Josh, and he was away at school. He was in Orlando. He was at UCF, and I called him, and so I was on the phone, and we watched the last. I'm getting emotional now, just thinking back on it. The last out together. And it was just my need to connect those three things, to connect my dad with this experience with my son. It was and I wasn't alone there either. That was not an isolated incident, but it was literally generations. I mean, you're talking literally 2-3 generations of people that people were rooting for. And it was, and you saw, the thing of it is that the players got it too. Players got it. I mean, you could see, and when they were being interviewed, Pedro would talk about it. Pedro said afterwards, he said, I wouldn't trade 3 World Series rings anyplace else for the one World Series, but this one World Series ring in Boston. Curt Schilling said it. He said, this isn't just for us. This is for all the other guys. This is for Yastrzemski and Williams and Rice and all of these guys that had Fisk, these guys that had got so close. Johnny Pesky, these guys that understood what it meant, and within the link, the chain, the link that they were in the chain of Red Sox fans, and what that meant to the community. That was really, really, really nice to see. And now it's just kind of funny because now they've won 4. I mean, my oldest grandchild was a grandson born in 2003. So in his lifetime, Red Sox have won 4 World Series. So that's pretty good. There's still nobody in the 2000s that's won more World Series than the Red Sox. So it's kind of interesting, and you see the evolution of it. And then the Patriots were terrible for forever, and the Patriots, I mean, my goodness, they have 20 years they were a force. So all the kids of today, New England fans, they're now obnoxious fans like the Yankee fans were for all those years when they kept winning. So it's kind of funny how it all rolls around. It's kind of funny, but I'm forever grateful to it. It's provided me with unspeakable joy and horrific sorrow, and there we are. We're back to joy and sorrow.
They always live together. Can't separate them.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
No,
It's
I think
funny.
that gives a good perspective on just sports in general. But I mean, I'll relate to myself first. I mean, I grew up in Florida and I never understood the Northeast obsession with professional sports. And then I
Right,
finally connected with one of my old coworkers who grew up in Boston, diehard Patriots fan. And he's like,
right.
we were on the phone one day and he finally was like, well, we don't have college sports here. So SEC football that I'm used to and the diehards that are
Correct.
down here, they don't
Correct.
have that up there. And it clicked for me. I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. And
Right.
last week we saw that with SEC. In Nick Saban retired. One of my
Yeah.
coworkers is a diehard Alabama fan. We
He's
were
got
still
to
at
be
work and she goes, I'm about to cry. Like
right.
that's how much ingrained it is in people and
Right.
people that aren't into sports. Like it's good perspective to have.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because when growing up in Boston, there's 75 colleges in Boston. Okay, 75 colleges, but there's 4 professional sports teams. So you don't go to your colleges for sports. And interestingly enough, for me, I never understood what a college town was. And even when I went to Gainesville, I didn't look at that as like a college town. It was just big. It was big. It was too big to be just a college town. And I never got the perspective of what a college town was until I went to your dad's alma mater at Clemson on one of the bus tours. And we went on the bus tours with the Florida Burn, and we hit 28 colleges in 8 days. And I did that with the Burn guys for 4 or 5 summers. And the first time I went to Clemson, I was like, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. I get it now. It was the whole town was the college. That's what a college town was. And I understood it, but I never had any understanding of that because in my town there were 75 colleges. So you didn't have, but Clemson, that runs that whole town. The whole town is the school. Everything is geared towards the school. And that's a really cool thing. That's a really cool thing. So I've enjoyed both those perspectives, which is why I was not afraid to move to Florida, getting back to figure it out along the way, and I came and it was the best thing I ever did. But I lived here 15 years before I considered it my home, which is kind of weird, but it's true.
Why do you think
It
that
wasn't
is?
until my dad passed away that I actually realized that this was my home. Until then it was like, well, I was living here, but home was Weymouth, Massachusetts, but then when my dad passed away and I said, wait a minute, this is my home. It's the home of my children. This is my home. So it's kind of an interesting journey, this thing we call life. But it was the best thing I ever did coming here. No doubt about it.
Do you think moving like geography in general, whether it's for you or just people in general, do you think geography can set an individual free?
No doubt. No doubt. I'll tell you, you know what it is, and this may be just true that the Northeast is very provincial. It's very, very provincial. And if you move away from your home, and whether or not, you go away to college, whatever it is, you can't help but broaden your perspective. And broadening your perspective is never, ever a bad thing. Never bad thing. And I think about that, and I'll tell you a quick story on the provinciality of my area back home. I'd been living here about maybe 6 or 7 years. And I went back home, and I happened to be back home when the local Elks Club was having a golf tournament. So a lot of guys that I went to high school with and that I played softball with while as a young man in my early 20s and late teens, they were involved and they were Elks members. And I went back to and I played in the tournament. And afterwards I was leaning on the bar having a beer with a high school buddy, a guy I was very close to in high school, and we kind of just drifted apart and whatnot. And he asked me a question. He said, "So what's the best golf course you've ever played on?" And I went, and I kind of thought for a minute. I went, let me think. And he says to me, "And don't tell me some fucking course in Florida." And I went, "Well, what's your question then?" I said, I don't know what your question is, but like he got angry at the prospect that I was going to tell him that I played on a course in Florida that was the best course I ever played on, you know. And I wasn't playing a lot of golf at that time in my life, you know, because I had kids in the house and all that kind of thing. But it was just, but that's very just an interesting thing, and that's how really protective they are. We do it best, you know what I mean? Which is kind of cool if you're immersed in it, but it's kind of narrow-minded if you're not. If you come outside it and you look at it, you can see the narrow-mindedness that's there. So anything that can open your perspective, and travel will do that for sure. And it's amazing. People are afraid. People are afraid, you know, so I've raised a family of travelers, which is a good thing. You know, I want them to be. It's kind of teaching your kids to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because my daughter's got a big sign hanging as you walk into her kitchen. It said nothing is ever accomplished in comfort zones. That's pretty good. Challenge yourself. Get out of your comfort zone.
I guess building on that, Ray, how did you instill that in your kids to take chances, be uncomfortable, sort of take on the chances of traveling and experience new things?
I think sports does it a lot, Bank. I think sports can do it. You know, I mean, you can place them in uncomfortable situations on the baseball field. You know what I mean? I mean, all those little things that happen, whether it's a rain delay, whether it's trying to stay focused for this, I think sports goes a lot to it. Can really, you know, and I mean, we do that. You know how many times even now as we're coaching, we talk about, you know, we're going to be in a Final Four. We can expect a lightning delay, but we don't want to care about it. We don't care about it. We're going to stay focused. That kind of thing. Think about focusing through the adversities that pop up. The bus is going to break down. How many times the bus break down? We were on the road, right?
I
And we're
don't
going
even remember.
right. Yeah, a lot. We had a bus breakdown going here, going there. See, you don't even remember because it never bothered you, you know. But I mean, that kind of stuff, um, you know, and I think, I mean, I think challenging each other athletically is a good thing. There was a competitive spirit in my house. There was a lot of boards getting flipped up when the Pachisi board didn't turn out for one particular person the right way. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And I always and we did travel a lot. We did a lot of road trips. I mean, I would drive back to Massachusetts when I was teaching. And when my dad was alive, I would pack up the kids and we'd drive up and we'd spend the summer in Massachusetts, you know, staying with my dad and hanging out with my sister and my sister's family, and they had kids the same age. So we were constantly going places, seeing new things and that kind of thing. You know, we'd go camping even here and there, not much, but often. Not the most comfortable of places to be, but different things like that. Just to if you that's what I would say, take kids on road trips all the time. When you're raising kids, road trips hard to beat. They're tough for you. You guys get beat up. You get beat up as a grown up. They suck the life out of you. There's a lot of energy that they draw from you. They always have more than you, but it's all worth it. It's all worth it. I get kids that my kids are in various stages with their kids now. You know, my oldest one's got a junior in high school and a junior in college. You know, and Josh has a guy who's going to turn 3 and he's going to have a new baby. And you know, and they're all in between, you know, and Margot's kids are all in between and they're all exhausted all the time. And I said, I remember my 30s. That's what I remember, total exhaustion. I said, but it pays off. It pays off in the end. But yeah, I would say travel, open them up, new experiences, and playing sports. That'll do it by itself.
Well, I have a question. If we're cool to just kind of like jump ship and go to something new.
Absolutely.
This has been bothering me honestly for like the past hour that we've been talking.
Okay.
What's Mary Erickson doing now?
Mary Erickson, she's in Venice right now. Mary Erickson has a studio in North Carolina. Her paintings are displayed well, I think I can tell you she's an international artist. She goes to France and paints. She goes up to Maine and paints. She paints. She has a home in North Carolina. She has a She has a studio here in Venice that was where I met her. She was living here, and the home that her mom lived in. Her mom has since passed, but she's turned that into a studio here, and she comes here in the wintertime. And I think she's got studio. She's done display, and she's a wildlife artist primarily. And I think there's a studio in San Francisco. I could be wrong about that, but I think there's one in California that covers her stuff. And she literally travels the world and she paints. She is living her dream. I can tell you that. And she is good.
Does she know the impact that she's had on your life?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we get together once. Oh yeah. She well I and my yeah, she received an acknowledgement in the Babe Ruth book. I said, Mary Erickson's the other one who made me believe that could happen. Oh yeah, she knows. We will go years without seeing each other. And then, she'll come home and she plays golf. So we were about a year ago. We went out about 3 or 4 times, played golf. We'll have dinner. We stay in touch, text, whatever. Yeah, she's a good friend. She's a good friend. And yeah, she knows. I don't let her forget it. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah,
but
that's awesome.
You can look her up online. I think she's got a website with she's been commissioned to do some really beautiful pieces, and she can I have a couple of them. I have the most unique Mary Erickson piece ever. I actually have an abstract Mary Erickson. It's the only one she ever did. And I snagged it up years ago. It's been hanging in my house for years. It's a 2-sided painting, and I have it framed on both sides. I had it open on both sides. I have a Mary Erickson abstract. That's pretty good to say about a wildlife artist.
It's 2-sided, and now I'm just intrigued by this.
Okay. Yeah. Well, she was
now he's going to try to find it.
Yeah.
You want to? Well, listen, I can't see you guys, but I'll go get it if you want me to. If you want to take a look at it, if you want to try, I can pull it off the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can see you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's all that matters. All right. Hang on.
Not technically good podcasting, but I'm all in on this.
No, it's fun. Funny enough, I've known him for 12 plus years. Never heard Mary Erickson out of his mouth once. Gone golfing with him.
You're gonna help me, guys. Now, see if you can see it.
Yeah, we're looking at it.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Now that's down by down near where the fish pier is in Venice. Okay. She went down one day, and this is the kind of what she does. She kind of sit and pick out a spot, and this is what was going on in this particular day. But really, and as I said to her afterwards, when I saw this, I said, this is what you saw, but then this is my favorite part of it. On the other side, whoop, you just knocked out of kilter here. This, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. And she entitled this painting, Indecision. And when I looked at it, I said, okay, so the first side is what you saw, and this is what you felt. So I said, yeah. And I had a passway in my house, and going from the kitchen into the living room on Nokomis Ave, when I used to live there. So it hung in the passway, so you could see both sides of it.
That's awesome. So, I was telling Adam when you were getting the painting that I've known you for 12 years. I've never heard Mary Erickson come out of your mouth or any mention of her. I guess I just haven't gotten the good stories out of you on the golf course like my dad has.
Well, it's just, that's a deeply personal story, and it's she did a lot of. I mean, I have a lot of photos around my house there that are framed of my kids when they were little and stuff, and she did all the framing. But it's just funny, it's funny the people that come into your life throughout the years. It's been it's just a remarkable journey. And you look back on people that have, if my high school basketball coach is still alive. He's 96. And he lives in Birmingham, Alabama, and he's been the guy that, he's been my my coaching mentor. I actually ended up coaching with him at one point. Coaching some CYO basketball with him at one point years ago when I was a young man. So that was my first experience in coaching. I was 20 and I was coaching 15, 16-year-old boys with him. So, he coached me but anyway, so it's a life takes you in great places. And Mary certainly is a jewel in my life. And I'm glad I could share it with you. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. I
Yep.
feel I'm very happy to know that I've now talked to you twice, and I got it on the second time we have spoken.
Pretty
First,
good, huh?
it took Banko a lot of years, so I'm glad to know
Did.
where I rank. I'm feeling good. I'm climbing the ladder, but um, we're starting to run towards the end on time. But I
Okay.
think like this Mary Erickson thing, you talking about your youth basketball coach that you're still connected with.
Yep.
There's no question that you value relationships, but you also don't hesitate to tell people the way you feel about them.
Uh-huh.
And when, like, when did that realization come for you? Is that like something within your family, or is that something that just feels powerful for you that you want to make people know how much?
I'll tell you that started with my dad later in life. My dad was a very interesting dude. He was a first generation Italian immigrant. Okay. His mom and dad came over. And he was going back to a traditional Latin, very, very clearly defined roles in the household, head of the household, that kind of stuff. And he was a pretty tough guy. My brother is 5 years older than me, and I'll tell you that my brother and I were raised by the same man, but it was two different men, if that makes sense. My dad went through a metamorphosis, and I think it was when my mom died. My mom died young. My mom was 62 when she died. My dad lived for 13 years after that. My dad was alone for 13 years after that. And I think losing my mom, I was never really all that overtly like affectionate or demonstrative or, even talking, of expressing myself all that much. But I think it was probably that. So I was in my 30s. And I really did. And then, interestingly enough, Adam, moving away probably helped in that regard because I would leave my dad for months at a time, what I'm saying. And I just didn't want him. I wanted him to know that even though I wasn't there, that how I felt about him. So, and then in that respect, and then raising my own kids, I would never not take every opportunity I could to let them know I love them and that I'm a squeezy guy. No, by then I was a huggy guy, constantly, constantly with my own kids. And and then now I'm pretty I don't have any qualms about it now. Because the older you get, your filter goes completely away, by the way. That's the great part about getting old. The filter goes. There's nothing hold back. Well, good, bad, or ugly, you know and it's interesting because you just realize it's I have as a I don't suffer well for fools as I get older, as Richie Curcio likes to say. And it's so you just say what you have to say. And some people don't want to hear it, but that includes everything. So I would say it's sort of an outgrowth of my emotion. And to watch my dad, who was really kind of a hard ass guy, coming up and watch him to becoming this wildly affectionate and huggable guy, especially for my kids. Grandkids will do that to you too. So there's a softening process, I think, that came through with that. And now it's just there. It's a and ultimately everything becomes about relationships. That's the bottom line. And therefore, and if that's going to be the focal point for you, which it sure as hell should be, I think, then there's no other way to do it but be real. And what helped me a lot with that is one of the guys that I coach with, Joe K is a very, 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 very openly affectionate and and a very expressive guy with all of us. And it's not anything that, it's second nature now. And we make sure we let each other know how we feel about each other. It's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah, that's something I want to do more of in my life. I think I've started to get better at it.
Yeah.
I've never been one to express emotion in that fashion. I'll
Uh-huh.
definitely let you know if I'm happy or mad, but
Right. Uh-huh.
how much people mean is something I definitely need to get better at. So, I mean,
Well, I'm
hearing
a
that
big
from you is
hugger
very
now.
cool.
I'm a big hugger. I like the hug. That's it. Yeah, I like the hug.
Yeah.
People
Well,
try and shake hands with me. Most of the people I will shake, it's just, but a lot of the people that really mean the most to me, I pull them in for a hug. So that's it. It's hard to hug Faulkner.
Yeah. Adam, you do show it in a different way. I mean, you're the one friend that actually calls us every once in and often. I don't call people
Right.
unless it's late at night, but otherwise I don't call people.
That's it.
well, thank you. Yeah, yeah. I guess I don't express it. I would say that's probably right. Like I try to use my words more for it now. But
Right.
yeah, for
That's
me,
good.
it's reaching out that like I'll try to be there, but the words
Yeah.
aren't always there with the presence that I'm trying to express.
Well, yeah, I understand. Well, that's the thing. Well, listen, presence is important. Like somebody says, you show up. Just show up. And you just show up. And that says a lot. Somebody asked me that about that. What do you think is somebody asked me, I think we're playing some sort of a card game, whatever. And somebody said to me, the question was, how would you describe yourself as a friend? And I kind of thought about it. I said, well, I show up. You just show up. And that's showing up in life is half the battle. Somebody said that once. I don't know who it was, but it's kind of true. And it's true in relationships too. And but that's ultimately what we are left with. When all is said and done and we're all gone. And I look at this right now, and I'll leave you with this, guys. My dad's been gone 25 plus years. There's nobody that has ever had more of an impact on my life than my dad. And the fact that I could he became my best friend, and the fact that I could be with him, that when he died, that was an experience that was so profound and powerful to me, and I still draw upon it today. Profoundly sad, but not a bad experience. And anyway, but with that having been said, I would just advise you that when your time comes, each of us, we're going to lose people that we love. And probably the greatest, most profound experience was being with my dad. And it's been 25 years, but being with him when he passed, that moment, like I said, I still draw on it. And in the 25 years he's been gone, I swear to you that there are times today I feel closer to him than I ever felt when he was with me, when he was here. He's still with me, and that's ultimately what we do. We carry the way we honor those we love is by the way we choose to live our lives, and we kind of carry on for them, and it's great. And there's profoundly sad experiences out there waiting for you, men. But that doesn't necessarily mean they will be bad experiences. So it's the joy and the sorrow. I'll leave you with the joy and the sorrow. How's that?
That sounds
Intertwined.
great. Thank you, Ray, so much.
Thanks,
This
guys.
was
This was
awesome.
awesome. This was awesome.
Wow.
Hey, good luck with it, and keep me abreast of how it's going. Adam, I want to know. Let me know when when that thing blows up for you. That's
That's the
cool.
plan.
All right, Phil.
Yeah, I'll see you on the golf course soon enough.
For sure. For sure.
Yep.
Thanks,
All
guys.
right. Thank you,
I
Ray.
appreciate it, Ray.
Yep. Grant, tell the old man I said, hey, I'll be in touch.
I will. I will.
See ya. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.